I'm Eliza Tran, 26, the youngest daughter of a Vietnamese-American shipping magnate. It was my father's memorial banquet. Hundreds gathered in the lavish ballroom of the Meridian Plaza, all in navy suits and sequined gowns, murmuring in hushed Vietnamese as if their silk dresses could absorb grief. At the front, a gilded portrait of my father towered above white orchids and sandalwood incense, a quiet altar veiled in smoke. But I wasn't allowed near the front. Family tables full. The usher mumbled without looking up, pointing to the far back. There's room near the caterer's door. I stared at him. I'm his daughter. He blinked, then glanced at the clipboard in his hand. Sorry. Your name's not on the primary list. Maybe you're listed under extended family. My mother, poised in her high-necked black ao dai, didn't turn around. My eldest brother, Min, had just lifted his glass to our father, the founder, the leader, the heart of this company. The guests clapped. I stood alone beneath the harsh spotlight of exclusion, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet. I took the seat near the caterer's door. The clink of serving trays and the hiss of kitchen steam filled my silence. No one greeted me. No one noticed. Until a hand brushed my shoulder. Eliza Tran, a man in a three-piece suit, asked. His voice carried across 3 tables. Yes, I blinked. I'm Anthony Rhodes, from Baring & Wells. He gestured to the stage. We need you up front. Now. It's regarding the succession contract you submitted. The air changed. Every eye turned. I heard the scrape of a chair. Min's glass paused mid-toast. I stood slowly, the fabric of my black dress catching the light. The board members, seated near the family, started murmuring. One of them leaned in to whisper something to the lawyer beside him. Please, Anthony said again, louder this time. Your signature has already triggered Clause 8.2, immediate transition of voting power. A chill sliced through the crowd. And then, silence. That kind of silence where even the clatter of ice cubes sounds blasphemous. The family turned. Min stood frozen. My mother's hand trembled slightly on her glass, and I felt it the weight of every dismissed email, every ignored message. Every meeting I wasn't invited to flicker and fall away like ash. If you've ever been quietly shoved aside in your own family, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. Because what happened next changed everything. People didn't clap when I walked toward the front. They cleared their throats, shifted in their seats, and tried to figure out what was happening without making eye contact. The sound of my heels crossing the marble floor was the only thing anyone could hear. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. I just walked. Min whispered something sharply to our cousin Dan, who immediately pulled out his phone. My mother finally looked at me, but there was no warmth in her eyes, only a searching stillness, as if she were trying to see something she hadn't expected. When I reached the podium, Anthony Rhodes handed me a folder. It was thick, embossed, legal-grade seriousness, under Clause 8.2 of Tran Family Holdings Revised Charter. Power of executive decision passes to the signatory of the sealed succession contract in the event of the founder's death. Anthony announced into the mic, Ms. Eliza Tran is the named successor. No one clapped. One of the board members, Mr. Kwong, stood up. This is preposterous. Min was groomed to lead. We've had strategy sessions, equity alignment plans. I have the signed charter. Anthony interrupted smoothly. We filed it 6 weeks ago. Eliza's father personally executed it before his hospitalization. My throat tightened, but I held the papers anyway, as if they might anchor me. I hadn't known he'd gone through with it. I thought he'd left it unsigned. I started, but Min cut in. This is nonsense, he said flatly. Eliza's not even been involved in operations for more than 6 months. She's a kid. A side intern. She couldn't even handle logistics on the Japan routes. His voice rose with every word. It filled the air like bad cologne. People flinched. She doesn't understand import law. Or bonded warehouse rotations. This is a family business, she's barely part of this family. That one stung. I swallowed. My fingers pressed into the folder's edge, and then I said the only thing I could think to say. Dad asked me to come to the hospital on a Thursday. My voice was quieter than his. But I came on a Tuesday. I brought the forecasts for Q4, a consolidated breakdown of the Pacific freight savings from shifting to Greenport, and my own draft of a reorg plan. He reviewed them, word for word. And then he asked me to sign something. There was a shift in the room, a lean forward, a hesitant curiosity. I didn't think he'd use it, I said. But he said if Min ever forgot that leadership wasn't a blood right, someone would need to remind him. And then I looked directly at Min. He said he trusted the quiet ones more. For a beat, everything froze. Then murmurs bubbled. An older uncle tapped his wife's hand, whispering, "The Kyo-o." Mr. Wen tilted his head like he was seeing me for the first time. Min's face had turned a slow, burning red. I stepped back from the mic. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood there. And when I sat down in the empty chair that should have been mine all along up front, beside the family, no one stopped me. That night, I didn't go home to the family house. I went to the apartment above the old warehouse in Long Beach, the one Dad secretly renovated just for me. It was bare-bones exposed brick, industrial lighting, and windows that trembled in the wind, but it smelled like cedar and coffee and concrete. Like work. I poured myself tea and stared at the contract copy Anthony left me. The official stamp shimmered under the desk lamp. I didn't feel powerful. I felt like I was holding something too big for my hands. Let me take you back a little. 6 years ago, I was the forgotten daughter. You know the type. Polite, soft-spoken, good at getting the dishes cleared without being asked. Graduated with honors from UCLA, then quietly accepted a data analyst job while my brothers were paraded around every Lunar New Year as the future of trans-shipping. Min was the eldest. He had the jawline, the suits, the LinkedIn perfect handshake. Koa was the rebel-turned-reformer, the second son who joined a nonprofit in Saigon and sent back investment ideas like they were love letters. And me, I was the one who stayed behind, who helped Mom sort donation envelopes for temple raffles, who sat silently at investor dinners, nodding as men asked if I was the translator. At home, no one asked me about numbers. They asked me when I'd get married, when I told Dad I wanted to learn the business. He didn't say no, but he didn't say yes either. He just said, "Min has too much pride. You might have enough silence." And that was it. I took a sabbatical from my job. I started showing up quietly to the warehouses, to customs briefings, to cross-docking tutorials. I offered to do inventory spot checks that no one wanted. I learned the tariff code system by heart. No one really noticed. Not until I brought in a proposal for a new route optimization system that cut our Tokyo-Houston shipments by 11% in Q2. Even then, it was a lucky idea according to Uncle Tam. So I kept quiet. I worked in the corners of the business, the overlooked parts. I started cleaning up the accounting trail on the Port of Oakland contracts. I found 2 errors no one caught. Fixed them. Didn't announce it. Dad noticed. One night, in his hospital bed. He handed me the charter. He didn't say much. Just, "It's not for now, but sign it." That was the last time I saw him conscious. After the banquet, the storm came. The board was divided. Min challenged the clause. Koa tried to mediate, acting like Switzerland with dimples. My mother refused to comment, though I heard her tell her cousin that she didn't believe I had the stomach for it. I didn't argue. I just showed up the next morning at headquarters with my laptop and a printed agenda. The receptionist didn't know what to do. She looked like I'd walked into the wrong building. Meeting room B. I told her. I scheduled it yesterday. She blinked. You have yes, I said, then smiled. And tell Mr. Kwong I've already reviewed the Singapore losses. We'll start there. I walked in. The room was cold, windowless. Old coffee lingered in the air, but the files were in order. My slides were prepped. And when the board slowly filed in, some confused, some curious, some clearly skeptical, I stood at the head of the table and said, I know you don't trust me yet. That's okay. Let's just begin with the numbers. The first board meeting was brutal. I could feel the tension as soon as the men took their seats, mostly older, mostly loyal to Min. They didn't speak so much as they sighed, shuffled papers, and tapped pens. Subtle ways of saying, this is ridiculous. I clicked to the first slide. Let's look at Singapore, I said. Our operating costs rose 14% this quarter, some of it's inflation, but the rest port fees, container leasing, fuel slippage could have been avoided. Mr. Kwong leaned back. You're not in operations. Eliza, you wouldn't know how those numbers work. I didn't blink. Page 7 of your March report has a duplicated invoice from a supplier called East Fuel Limited. I traced it. It was billed twice. And paid twice. I've already filed a flag. He froze. The room shifted. Min wasn't there. He'd skipped it. But I imagined him sitting somewhere nearby, watching a live feed, fuming. I continued. This isn't about one mistake. It's about patterns. And the pattern is, no one's watching the leak points. Everyone's assuming someone else will. That's how companies rot. Mr. Wen, our most senior director, frowned thoughtfully. Who gave you this data? I met his eyes. I pulled it myself. I've been shadowing finance for 8 months. You were shadowing, he asked, surprised. I nodded, quietly, with permission, but I didn't make noise. There was a silence, not the kind from shock, but the kind people have when they're processing a new idea, like an equation they didn't expect to work out. I moved on. An hour later, when I finally closed the deck, I said only this. You don't have to accept me yet. Just know I'm not here to play pretend. I care about this company because I've worked in every part of it, and because my father gave me the only thing that ever mattered to him, his trust. No applause, no nods. But no one walked out either. After they left, Mr. Wen lingered. You remind me of your grandmother, he said. She never made speeches either, but your grandfather listened to her. I smiled, softly. Thank you. Then I gathered my papers and went back to my little office in the corner of the 5th floor, far from the executive suite Min still occupied. I wish I could say it got easier. It didn't. In the weeks that followed, I was tested constantly. Min sent out a mass email to all department heads calling for a reassessment of leadership structure. Koa suggested I hand over client relations until the family resolved its differences. My uncles started holding their own dinners without inviting me, pretending like I was some interim figure, a legal placeholder, not a real person. Mom never said a word. She just kept hosting prayer ceremonies at home, always lighting one less stick of incense than usual. Quiet disapproval. But I kept going. I woke up at 5:00 a.m. every day, answered every email, sat through shipping audits, warehouse complaints, labor disputes, and tariff lectures without flinching. I let them challenge me, but I never cracked. Because somewhere deep inside, I realized being underestimated gave me freedom. They didn't see me coming, so I could move in silence. One night, I stayed late at the Long Beach terminal office, reviewing vessel offloading schedules. Most execs would leave that to junior staff. But I found something: a misalignment in container returns that was costing us $180,000 a month. I wrote up a plan. I submitted it directly to the board. Didn't ask Min. Didn't CC my mother. Just laid out the facts with solutions and timelines. 3 days later, Mr. Wen replied, "Approved. Effective immediately. No debate. No questions. Just action." That's when things began to change. A month later, I was invited to a small executive lunch with our Singapore partners. They didn't expect me. Min had RSVP'd. But when I showed up, wearing my navy blazer and a clear folder of profit reports, the regional director shook my hand and said, "We heard you caught the fuel invoice glitch." I nodded. "Just doing my part?" He smiled. "Your father would be proud. He always liked precision." That one hit hard. For a second, I felt something in my chest, something tight and warm and a little sad. Afterward, I stepped outside alone. Downtown Los Angeles shimmered in the heat. Horns honked. Pedestrians scurried. But I just stood on the curb, letting the city press around me. I looked up at the sky, not for any reason. Really, just to breathe. And that's when Min showed up. His Tesla pulled up behind mine. He didn't get out right away. Just watched me through the windshield. When he finally stepped out, he didn't smile. "You're making a mess," he said. I turned to face him. "No," I replied. "I'm cleaning up yours." He scoffed. "This isn't about you. This was never supposed to be about you." I wanted to say something sharp, something poetic, but all I said was, "I'm not here to be seen. I'm here to do the job." He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You won't last. They'll eat you alive." I nodded. "Maybe. But if they do, they'll know I bit back." That was the last real conversation we had. People ask me sometimes why I didn't walk away, why I didn't just cash out my inheritance and leave. But the truth is, I loved the smell of sea salt in the loading docks. I loved the hum of forklifts, the clatter of cranes, the clack of keys from staff who never took lunch breaks. I loved the numbers, the maps, the rhythms of a business that ran like blood through our family's history. And maybe, more than anything, I loved the idea that someone like me, a quiet girl in the background, could make something real happen. Because I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was chasing precision, and in that pursuit, I found a kind of peace. It was during the annual review in Q2 that I realized something had shifted, not just in the numbers, but in how people looked at me. Not looked past me, looked at me. It happened at the logistics center in Fremont. I was there for a walkthrough of our automation upgrade. As usual, Min didn't come. Koa sent a proxy. The board assumed I'd be escorted by someone with real authority, but I arrived alone. No assistant, no PR handler, just me, a clipboard, and a cup of gas station coffee. "Morning, Ms. Tran," said Alvin, the dock manager. He handed me a hard hat. "Didn't expect you'd come yourself." I smiled. "You said there were delays in container lane 3. I figured I should see it. That was all. No posturing, no, I'm the boss now energy, just curiosity." And maybe that was what made them start opening up. Because that morning, Alvin didn't just give me a tour, he showed me the repair logs, the employee shift conflicts, the 3 broken forklifts the previous execs had signed off on as functional. I stayed 5 hours. When I left, he patted my shoulder and said, "Your dad used to come like that too. Quiet, no entourage, just showed up and fixed stuff." I didn't say anything, but something swelled in my chest, a mix of grief and pride that tasted like warm metal. That evening, I went home and updated the employee maintenance logs myself. It took 3 hours. But the next day, when the board saw the report, they didn't question its origin. They just read it. Of course, Min wasn't gone. He was circling waiting. 3 weeks after the Fremont visit, he filed a formal appeal to the family trust, claiming Dad's contract was coercive due to illness. He brought in a lawyer from San Jose. He submitted hospital charts, arguing Dad had been under morphine influence when he signed the succession document. It got messy. Mom didn't respond publicly, but I knew she was torn. She still had old-world instincts sons inherit, daughters marry out. That was the hierarchy she'd grown up with. I wasn't angry at her. Not really. I think she was grieving too. But grief makes people revert. It makes them cruel without noticing. One night, I stopped by the family house. The living room was dark except for the altar light. My father's portrait sat beside 3 glowing incense sticks. No one was home. I sat down anyway. I stared at his photo. His eyes looked tired in that portrait, tired, but knowing, like he'd seen every betrayal coming and still made his choice anyway. I whispered, "Why me?" And for once, I didn't want an answer. I just wanted him to know I was trying. The court hearing was scheduled 2 months later. By then, I had made 4 executive decisions that saved the company a total of $1.3 million, 2 shipping route consolidations, 1 supplier renegotiation, and 1 labor restructure that actually improved morale. But the media only focused on one headline: youngest daughter battles brothers in power struggle over transshipping. They didn't mention the numbers, just the drama. On the day of the hearing, I wore a plain black suit and a thin chain necklace my father had given me when I turned 17. It was delicate, almost invisible, like I felt walking into that room. Min wore a charcoal suit, glossy shoes, and an expensive watch. He smiled at the cameras like it was a press event. Inside the courtroom, our lawyers did most of the talking. But when the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood. I didn't look at Min. I looked at the judge. My father wasn't weak when he signed that document. I said. He was tired, but his mind was sharp. He'd just spent 2 hours reviewing cost projections with me. He asked smart questions. He corrected one of my margins. I took a breath, and he said one sentence I'll never forget. "I don't want a lion to run this. I want a listener." There was silence. Even the court recorder paused, and I sat down. The judge ruled in my favor 3 days later. The succession contract stood. After that, Min disappeared from the business. Not publicly, he still showed up at family events, still smiled in photos, but in the company. His name faded. He stopped CCing himself on emails, stopped calling the warehouse leads. His office light stayed off. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like an amputation. Because no matter how wrong he'd been, he was still my brother. The one who used to steal shrimp off my plate when we were kids. The one who taught me how to cheat at Monopoly and how to forge Mom's signature on late permission slips. We used to laugh. We hadn't laughed in a year. Meanwhile, something strange began happening. The board meetings became quieter, but not in a bad way. There were fewer interruptions, fewer passive-aggressive sighs. People listened, really listened. I started to notice it during a discussion on digitizing our customs documents. Mr. Kwong, who once treated me like a teenager in a blazer, actually asked for my opinion, and not performatively. He scribbled down my answer. Afterward, he stayed behind and said, "We're stable again. I didn't think we would be. You proved me wrong." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Sometimes silence was still the most honest language I had. There was one moment, though, that made everything real. It came during a quarterly staff mixer. Nothing fancy, just catered food, folding chairs, some music. I was standing by the coffee station when a woman from HR approached. Her name was Linda, middle-aged, sharp eyes, not someone prone to flattery. She said, "You don't know this, but a few years ago, when your dad was sick and no one knew what was going to happen, a lot of us were scared." I turned to her. "Scared, yeah. We thought the company would collapse under the boys. No offense, but the ego tension was thick. You're different." I didn't say anything. She smiled, shrugged. "Anyway, just thought someone should tell you. It's not going unnoticed." Then she walked off, as casually as she'd come, and I stood there for a long time, holding my plastic cup of cold coffee, letting those words settle into my bones. It's not going unnoticed. Later that night, I sat on my apartment balcony. The city buzzed below. Cars blinked red and white. Some neighbor played soft jazz from a floor above. The wind moved through my potted plants like a whisper. I looked up at the sky again, and this time, I felt something different. Not power, not revenge, just space, room to breathe, room to exist. By the end of that fiscal year, Tran Family Shipping posted its most stable margin since 2014. It wasn't a record-breaking quarter. There were no flashy headlines, no massive acquisitions or wild IPO rumors, just calm. The numbers held, the staff held, the ports ran on time, and for the first time in a long while, no one was yelling in the boardroom, but the silence felt earned. I sat alone in the executive conference room one evening after everyone had left. The room still smelled faintly of takeout from lunch lemongrass, soy, and faint traces of coffee. The lights were low. The city skyline stretched through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind me. My laptop screen glowed. I was reviewing our new vendor compliance tracker, something I'd proposed 3 months ago and had quietly implemented. It cut our delays by 9%. No one had even noticed until the metrics changed. That had become the theme of my leadership invisible impact. And weirdly, I liked it that way. The loudest person in the room used to win. Now the one who asked the right question at the right time quietly took the lead. I learned that power didn't have to shout. Then one morning, my mother called. Just her name lighting up my screen was enough to stop me cold. She rarely called me directly. Usually, her messages came through other people, cousins, aunts, family friends. When she did call, it meant something had shifted. I answered on the third ring. "Eliza," she said, "there's a ceremony next week. For your father. At the temple. They're honoring his memory." I waited. She didn't say anything else. So I asked, "Do you want me to come?" A pause. "Yes," she said. "You should be there." That was the first time she'd used should with me in a long time. Usually, it was if you want, or up to you, or just silence. But should that meant something? And I knew exactly what she was doing. She was extending a branch. Not olive, not blooming, but a branch all the same. And I took it. The ceremony was held at a small temple in Garden Grove, the kind with red-tiled roofs and dragons carved into the columns, where incense drifts like fog and grandmothers wear silk gloves to pour tea. I wore a navy au dye with subtle gold embroidery. No logos, no heels, just quiet tradition. When I arrived, the courtyard was full. I saw Min standing with our uncles, dressed in a sleek, traditional black tunic with silver cuffs. Koa was beside him, holding a string of prayer beads. They didn't wave, but they didn't turn away either. I walked past them, straight to the altar. I knelt, lit a stick of incense, bowed 3 times, and when I looked up, I saw my mother seated under the shade of a fig tree, watching me. Our eyes met. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. Later, during the reading of dedications, the head monk called names. Min first, Koa second, then me, Eliza Tran, honored daughter of the late Mr. Tran Min Kwang. There was a beat of silence after my name, a beat I wasn't sure how to interpret, but I walked to the front anyway. I took the microphone. It was small, crackly, and ancient. I held it with both hands. I don't have a poem. I began. I don't have the words my brothers do. All I have is a memory. I paused. One day, before he got sick, my father and I walked through the Oakland Dock warehouse at sunset. No cameras, no staff, just us. He pointed to a loose wire on a crate and said, "That'll cost us $5,000 if no one sees it." Soft laughter rippled through the elders. He saw the details. I continued. Not the speeches, not the names. The details. And I think he left this company and this family to whoever would keep seeing them. I bowed and walked back. No applause, but no coughs, no whispers. Just stillness. After the ceremony, I stepped outside and stood near the koi pond. The water moved in slow circles. Orange and white scales shimmered under the sun. A breeze lifted the scent of lotus and burning paper. Min came up behind me. "Nice speech," he said. I didn't turn. It wasn't a speech. He chuckled once. Fair. Then silence stretched between us like string pulled tight. Finally, I turned. "You still hate me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "I don't understand you." I nodded. "That's not hate." He looked away. "You took something that was supposed to be mine, and you ignored something that was already yours." I replied, "Respect." That one landed. He exhaled, long and slow. "You're not Dad." "No," I said. "But neither are you." He didn't speak again, but when I walked away, he didn't stop me, and I counted that as progress. A few weeks later, something odd happened. Linda from HR forwarded me an anonymous staff survey. I'd asked her to run it months ago, an internal temperature check on culture, leadership, retention plans. At the bottom of one comment, someone wrote, "The company finally feels like it's being run by someone who remembers what it's like to be invisible." I stared at that line for a long time, because they were right. I didn't come from a place of power. I came from watching others take it. And maybe that's why, when it came to me, I didn't strangle it. I listened to it. I walked into meetings with engineers, warehouse floor managers, compliance officers, and sat at their eye level. I asked questions. I admitted what I didn't know. And I let their expertise shape the future. That summer, we launched a new pilot initiative, Return to Port. It was an employee-led program for identifying inefficiencies in the return journey of our freight vessels. For years, we'd hemorrhaged money on dead mileage. The board never prioritized it, but I did. Because I knew the people who drove those trucks. I'd eaten lunch beside them. So when the first report came in showing a 12% increase in efficiency, I didn't frame it as a personal win. I sent an all-company email. Subject line, "Thank you for the details." And inside, I wrote to the staff who watched, who noticed, who spoke, "This company moves because of you." That was all. But my inbox flooded. Messages from the dock workers, the inventory techs, even a janitor who said, "No one ever sent a message like that before." One night, I found myself back at Dad's old office. It had been cleaned out, sealed, and unused since his passing. No one wanted to take it, but I had the key. I walked in quietly, not intending to stay, just to remember. The room was untouched. The same leather chair, the old paperweight, the faint scent of wood polish and old receipts. I sat, not because I felt like I belonged, but because I finally didn't feel like I was pretending. The fall season came with rain, thick and slow, coating the port yards in a glossy sheen. I started wearing boots again, not because I needed to, but because they reminded me of my early days on the warehouse floor, where no one cared about my last name, just whether I showed up. That's where I felt most at home in the in-between. The executive suite upstairs still felt too polished. Min's shadow lingered in the form of expensive whiskey bottles left behind in the credenza, a framed photo of Dad he hadn't bothered to take, and a scent I couldn't name but always associated with sharp smiles and private ambition. I hadn't moved into his office. I kept mine near the operations floor, close to the stairs and just above the loading docks. Every morning, I brewed my own coffee. I used the same mug white, chipped near the handle, with the words, "Handle with care," printed in fading red font. A warehouse guy had given it to me after my first full month, said I'd earned it. I believed him. That November, something unexpected happened. One of our competitors, Langston Shipping Group, reached out to propose a quiet partnership. Not a merger, not a takeover. A shared port access initiative. One that had been floated for years but never gained traction because the big players didn't trust each other. But they trusted me. Or, more specifically, they trusted what my record showed. Your team is agile. Their rep said over lunch, "You don't bury decisions in meetings. You act." That surprised me, because for so long, I'd been accused of not acting, of waiting, of observing too much, too long. Turns out, restraint looks a lot like strategy when you stop apologizing for it. I brought the proposal to the board. Mr. Wen leaned back, tapping his pen like he always did when deep in thought. "This would have never happened under Min," he said, not unkindly. "I know," I replied. "Are you sure about it?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Because it's not about legacy. It's about direction." That sealed it. Unanimous vote. And just like that, Tran Family Shipping signed its first external port access agreement in nearly 30 years. We didn't go public with it. No press release, no headline, just a subtle adjustment to the map. But it changed everything. I started getting invited to panels, conferences, women in logistics luncheons, and next-gen CEO roundtables. I declined most of them, not out of arrogance, just honesty. I wasn't ready to be a face. I was still a worker, still learning, still quietly making spreadsheets at midnight and waking up early to run numbers before the city stirred. But one invitation did catch my attention. It was from the East Bay Business Journal. An award ceremony. Executives to watch. My name had been nominated anonymously. I almost deleted the email. But then I saw the list of nominees. 5 men, 1 other woman, and me. I didn't know what category they put me in, but I knew what room I wanted to be in. So I said yes. The ceremony was held in a hotel ballroom, white tablecloths, low chandeliers, too much perfume in the air. People clap for themselves more than they clap for others. I didn't bring family, didn't bring staff either. Just showed up in a black dress and a navy blazer, holding nothing but a folded copy of the company's mission statement in my pocket. They seated me near the back. Someone assumed I was someone's assistant. When the keynote speaker said, "Our next honoree turned around a family business many believed would collapse under inexperience," I didn't react. Until they said my name. I walked up slowly, didn't make eye contact with anyone, just took the mic. "I'm not used to stages," I said. "I'm used to ports. Laughter, light, but sincere. I've spent the last year doing what my father taught me, watching quietly, asking questions, and fixing what's broken without asking for credit." Pause. "I'm not sure what leadership's supposed to look like." But I know what it feels like when people stop waiting for someone else to take responsibility and start owning the details themselves. I didn't read from notes, didn't rehearse, just spoke. When I stepped down, no one clapped loudly, but a few people stood. A few more looked at me differently, and I felt, for the first time, seen without surprise, like maybe I belonged, not because I proved anything, but because I stayed. Back at the office the next week, someone left a small paper boat on my desk. No note, no explanation, just a folded piece of grid paper, creased carefully, sitting on top of my keyboard. I held it in my palm and smiled. Someone understood. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. But the handwriting was unmistakable. Min's. I unfolded it carefully. It read, Eliza. I don't agree with how it happened. I probably never will. But I've been watching. And I can't deny the results. Dad saw something I didn't. That's on me. For what it's worth, you've earned more than the title. You've earned my silence. I'm leaving for Hanoi next month. Starting something new. Don't chase me, just take care of it. Min, I didn't cry, but I didn't breathe for a long time after reading it. Sometimes the quietest apologies are the most complete. I kept the letter in my drawer, didn't reply, didn't tell anyone, just let it sit there beside my old shipping badges, the mug with the chipped handle, and a printout of my first budget report, the one Dad corrected with a red pen in the hospital. Every now and then, I'd pull open that drawer, not to reminisce, just to remind myself of where the silence began, and what it gave me. One Friday evening, I stood outside the Long Beach terminal alone. The sun was setting, splashing copper light across the stacks of containers. The cranes were still. The wind was soft. Somewhere in the distance, a freight horn bellowed low and deep, like a memory calling home. I watched a tugboat glide across the harbor. I didn't speak, didn't move, just listened. To the waves, to the wind, to the rhythm of something much older than my grief, bigger than my title, stronger than my silence. I stood there until the lights came on, and even then, I stayed a little longer. The first Christmas without my father arrived like a tide, quiet at first, then flooding every room I entered. The family didn't host the usual party that year. No lion dance, no 12-course feast, no sprawling guest list with CEOs, monks, and cousins from Orange County we barely knew. The house stayed dim. The red and gold banners were boxed away. Even the koi pond lights remained off. But I still went. I brought jasmine tea, my father's favorite. The house smelled the same: sandalwood, soy sauce, floor polish, and history. Min's old jacket still hung by the door, even though he hadn't returned from Hanoi. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived, slicing ginger with the same slow precision she'd taught me as a child. She looked up. "You came," she said. "I always do," I replied. She nodded. Then, as if nothing had ever gone wrong, she set out 2 porcelain teacups. We didn't speak much. We just sat at the small table, steam rising between us, the tea gently blooming in the cups. There was something in that silence that didn't hurt anymore. Not warmth, not approval, but mutual breath. After a while, she said, "Your father told me once you were like the tide." I raised an eyebrow. "The tide," he said. "Min is the storm. Eliza is the tide. You don't notice her coming until everything has changed." I didn't answer, but I never forgot that sentence. The new year came with small shifts. A few staffers from departments I barely interacted with stopped me in the hallways. "Thanks for adjusting the overtime policy," one said. "We noticed you moved the lockers closer to the loading zone." Another added, "They weren't big things, but they saw them. That was the win." I didn't need headlines. I just needed notice, the kind that came without being asked for. One day, I walked into the admin break room and someone had drawn a cartoon on the whiteboard. It was me, tiny, scribbled, sitting at a desk surrounded by waves and shipping containers. Above it was a caption, Captain Eliza still sailing. I laughed out loud. Not politely. Really laughed. And someone from IT popped their head in and said, "Took you long enough to find it. It's been up 2 days." I hadn't noticed, but I was glad it was there. Then came the Supplier Summit in Seattle, a 3-day conference full of handshakes, spreadsheets, and hotel breakfast buffets with cold eggs. Not glamorous, but essential. I was set to give a 15-minute talk on intermodal route efficiency. I had the slides, I had the numbers, but 5 minutes before I went up, something inside me shifted. I closed the laptop. When I walked onto the stage, I held nothing. Just the mic. "I'm not going to talk about supply chains today," I said. "You already know what works. You've got the data." People stared, unsure. "I want to talk about the people behind those chains, the ones who load freight in the rain, who catch clerical errors before they become lawsuits, who sleep in cots during backlog nights, who don't get thanked unless something breaks." Silence. "You want efficiency? Start there. Honor them." It wasn't a keynote. It was a reminder. When I stepped down, a man from one of our rival firms approached me. He extended a hand. "Ms. Tran," he said, "I've been in this business 30 years. Never heard someone talk like that." I shook his hand. "Maybe you just weren't listening to the right people." He smiled. "You're going to change things, aren't you?" I didn't answer, but I hoped he was right. A few days after I returned, Koa showed up at the office. No appointment, no advance notice, just walked in wearing a windbreaker and carrying 2 banh mi sandwiches. "I figured you didn't eat," he said. He was right. We sat in my office, unwrapping the sandwiches. Pork for me, tofu for him. Just like when we were kids. "So," he started chewing. "You did it." I sipped water. "Did what outlived the storm. Outmaneuvered the board. You even outlasted Mom's silent treatment." I smiled. "Is that what this is now? A victory lap?" He shrugged. "No. This is a truce." We ate in quiet for a moment. Then he added, "I didn't support you when I should have." I took Min's side. Not because I believed in him, just because I didn't believe in you. "That makes 2 of us," I said softly. He looked up. I kept going. For a long time, I didn't believe in me either. I thought I was just background, a support beam in someone else's house. And now I folded my wrapper. Now I realize I was never background. I was the foundation. Koa nodded. "So, what happens next?" "Same thing that always happens," I said. "The work." The contract with Langston went live in February. It was quiet, just a shift in port scheduling and container rights, but within 2 weeks, our turnaround times improved. That meant happier clients, happier crews, and a quiet line of respect forming across the entire coastline. I got a handwritten thank you note from one of our junior schedulers in Tacoma. She said, "For the first time, I feel like we're part of something bigger." That note sat on my desk beside Min's letter. And then came the final board review of the year. 12 chairs, 1 long table, no chaos, just spreadsheets, project debriefs, and results. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't prep a big presentation. I just stood. "No reorgs this quarter," I said. "No major shifts. We're not making noise. We're making rhythm. That's what matters now." Mr. Kwong nodded. Mr. Wen smiled. No one interrupted. I sat back down, and that was it. Later that week, I stayed late at the terminal again, just watching. The water shimmered, The ships creaked. The hum of diesel and salt hung in the air like memory. A young woman passed by, maybe an intern, maybe new staff. She stopped. "Are you Eliza?" I nodded. She held out her hand. "I heard about you. I want to do what you do someday." I shook her hand gently. "Then start where no one's watching," I said. She blinked. "Is that what you did?" I nodded. "Every day." She smiled and walked off. And I stood alone by the water again. Not because I was lost, but because I'd finally found the place where silence felt like home. Spring came quietly. No fanfare, no sudden bloom, just a soft warming of mornings and a slower pace to the wind along the dock lines. The cranes moved a little easier in the sun. The seagulls returned to the railings like they remembered they had a place there. I started arriving at work just after sunrise, earlier than usual, even for me. I didn't do it for optics. I didn't do it because anyone asked. I just liked the quiet. There was something sacred about being the first one in the building, hearing the hum of the vending machines before the phone started ringing, walking the perimeter of the port office while the lights were still off. The air smelled different before the day began. Cleaner, expectant. One morning, I paused in front of the front glass doors and saw my reflection staring back, hair tied back. No makeup. Black coat draped over my arm. A coffee thermos in hand. I looked older than 26. Not tired. Just changed. I thought about the girl who'd stood at her father's memorial, told to sit in the back by a man who didn't know her name, and then I walked inside like I owned the place. Because I did. The company's anniversary fell in April, 35 years since my father had incorporated Tran Family Shipping with one rusty vessel and a handwritten ledger he kept tucked inside a plastic sleeve. I still had that ledger. I'd found it during the estate clear-out, buried beneath invoices and a cracked abacus. The handwriting was faded but sharp. Every shipment, every route, every dollar accounted for. No shortcuts. No guesses. He built this from nothing. Not with volume, but with vision. I decided we would mark the anniversary simply. No gala, no press. Just a single all-hands meeting. I stood at the front of the warehouse, not on a stage, but in the middle of the floor. Staff formed a half circle around me, drivers, schedulers, admin, inventory, operations. No blazers, no protocol. I wore a plain white shirt and black jeans. My boots were scuffed. I held up the plastic sleeve with the original ledger. "This," I said, "is what we started with." I passed it to the floor manager, who handed it around. People looked at it like an artifact, a relic from someone else's mythology. But it was real, and so was the room we stood in. We didn't survive the last 2 years because we had the best tech or the flashiest campaigns. I continued. We survived because the people in this room noticed the details, fixed the small things, stayed late, spoke up. I looked around the circle. Every business has a brand, but only a few have a soul. This one has it because of you. No applause. Just nods. Quiet pride. That's the kind of leadership I had grown into. No fireworks, just fire that never went out. That evening, I walked the terminal alone. The sky was violet. The ships looked like sleeping beasts, tethered and gleaming under floodlights. The waves clapped softly, like distant applause for something long finished. I stood by the rusted railing and took out my phone. I had one message waiting. From Min. Heard about the anniversary. I remembered him in my own way. Hope you did too. Hanoi's good. I'm starting to understand quiet now. I stared at it for a while. Didn't reply. Didn't delete it either. Some things didn't need closure to be complete. Later that week, I finally went into my father's office with the intention of making it mine. I stood in the doorway for a while. The air was still. The chair, The desk. The old clock untouched. It wasn't haunted, but it wasn't empty either. I walked to the bookshelf and ran my fingers along the spines. Business manuals, shipping codes, Vietnamese poetry. I found a folder tucked between two thick binders. It was labeled in my father's handwriting, Eliza, when the time is right. My breath caught. I sat down and opened it slowly. Inside a single page, typed. Dated 2 years ago. If you're reading this, it means I trusted you more than I knew how to say. Not because you're my daughter, but because you never asked for power. And that's how I knew you could hold it. Be fair. Be quiet. Be relentless. Love them, even when they don't love you back. And if they forget your name, remind them with action. I'm proud of you. Eliza. Bah, I folded the letter slowly and held it to my chest. No tears came. Just that heavy, quiet swell of being seen. We updated the leadership directory that month. My photo was added to the executive wing. For years, I'd walked past that wall of portrait stoic men in suits, each framed in bronze. I was the first woman, the youngest, the one who used to stand in the back during group shots. Now my image looked out over the atrium, quiet and calm, and beneath it, Eliza Tran, CEO. 3 words. But I didn't need more. I didn't change the company slogan. Still read the same as it always had, built to endure. Only now, I understood what it meant. It wasn't about size. It wasn't about legacy. It was about the ability to keep going when no one is clapping, when no one is calling your name, when the rooms are cold and the stakes are silent. Endurance is lonely, but it's also beautiful, because it's earned. A few days later, I took the long drive to the Oakland port just to walk. I remembered the first time Dad took me there. I was 10. He pointed at a cargo crate and asked, "What's inside?" I'd shrugged. He said, "That's the problem with people. They only ask when they think the answer will impress someone, never when it's just curiosity." I never forgot that. So that day, I walked along the rusted pathways, looked at the crates, and asked myself what was inside, not the metal, but the work. And I answered everything that matters. Let them keep their polished towers and flashy titles. I had steel, wind, numbers, memory, paper boats, and silence that sang with purpose. I don't know if I'll run this forever. Maybe one day. I'll hand it over to someone quieter than me, someone who listens before speaking, someone who understands that leadership isn't a crown, it's a commitment. But for now, I'm here, still walking the docks, still showing up early, still paying attention, and that's enough.